Hey everybody, thank you for joining me, Rob. I'm glad that you're here, that we get to do this. I think we met back at ConnectWise event, probably I think 6 months ago from now at this point. You are the CEO of SNS Security Network Service, and can you please introduce yourself for those that don't know you? I know I've gotten to know you, and it's been great so far, so please.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's my name is Rob Gelsinger. I am the CEO of Secure Network Services. We're a Central Florida-based MSP. Been in business since 2004 as an MSP and service pretty much the Gulf Coast of Florida to the Space Coast of Florida and everything in between. So your Tampa Bay, Orlando area is kind of where we do the bulk of what we do and that whole area. So yeah,
Nice. Awesome. So thanks for that. Are you with SNS Polk? Let's start the story from the beginning. Tell me like how did you get here? What led you to becoming an MSP and starting this company?
sure. Well, I mean, we started back in 2004. It actually started as I was an IBMer who basically was career IBM, and while I was doing that, my wife got pregnant with our second child, and I figured I'd start to do IT work on the side as a sideline gig, and sure enough, within 1 to 2 years of doing that, it kind of took on a life of its own and became what we would have all referenced as a break fix shop. We were doing support and or implementation work and things like that for a number of businesses, and then probably around 2010 or 2011, about 5 or 6 years into it, we kind of pivoted because that's when the channel really started to emerge for software. Up until that point, I don't really think there were what you would classify as a true MSP because really the solutions that we leverage now, the automation, RMM, things like that, really didn't exist in the small to medium business space. So we were doing a lot of manual things and a lot of scripting. It's very similar. It's what's strange is my background at IBM at the enterprise level was very similar to this. It was doing exactly what we do for the MSP, but at the enterprise level. So I was supporting the infrastructure that 400 end user support technicians or help desk technicians used to support roughly 500,000 end users.
Hmm.
And I was kind of that field general who I wasn't the guy who did everything, but I was the guy who knew everyone who did everything. So whenever there was a problem, I was the person who pulled in those different resources and made it happen. And that's really what you do as the owner of an MSP or the operations manager for an MSP is you're basically the guy who knows who needs to be engaged at every moment in time
Right.
and then basically does that. So
With that being
yeah, go
said,
ahead.
can I ask, like, for those that aren't really familiar exactly with what your MSP does, can you tell us a little bit about today, what it looks like, what SNS is able to accomplish and do for people?
Sure. There's we're a little bit different, but I think it's more becoming an emerging model that people are pivoting to.
Mhm.
The traditional MSP model was, hey, we do everything in house. We're going to hire a bunch of different skills. We're going to have 15 or 20 guys that work for us, and we're going to be able to do everything that you would possibly need, whether it's servers or endpoint support, help desk, backup disaster recovery, cybersecurity. We're doing it all in house. We do, and that was the selling point for a lot of businesses was that we only have to go one place for this. Okay, we do the same thing except for we do it with a much smaller staff, and the way that we do it is by leveraging our partnerships. So I would much rather give enterprise quality solutions to our clients and do it at either the same or less cost but be able to provide a better solution. And what I mean by that is a perfect example is like NOC services. That's your server management, your server updating, patching, but also like the troubleshooting and keeping everything running. Your typical traditional MSP model was, hey, we have one or two guys on our team. They're going to be receiving all these events, these alerts from the event viewers, things like that. They're going to go through them and they're basically going to then take corrective action on the servers. Well, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to basically have a solution that was triggered by the software and that we wanted knock monitoring 24/7 so that we could say, hey, when a problem happens or there's an issue that occurs, it actually automatically creates a ticket and auto assigns that to a knock engineer who's going to pick it up immediately and start working the problem. That way it stays a molehill, never becomes a mountain. And
Right.
it removes a lot of the human error of
Mhm.
sifting through logs,
Yeah.
doing
It's so
manual
funny.
trial and error.
That's what Guards is doing now with our SOC. We're utilizing the ability of AI to scan logs and to look at
Sure,
alerts, issues, and then aggregate those with a logic that says, "Hey, this is possibly a potential account compromise,"
sure.
and then letting our team make sure that there's not a false positive, false negative. So you guys are doing something similar in your own sense, right? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, we're doing something similar. We were, well, and this is all how we basically pitched ourselves to make
Mhm.
our to differentiate ourselves and to basically give clients 24/7 without the 24/7 price.
And as a
Um,
new MSP that's building, how did you staff your knock? Like, how did you keep your costs low and find good talent to do that?
We actually we don't have our own knock. We actually outsource that to our partner ConnectWise. So,
Yeah.
and then we've also partnered with Blackpoint, and Blackpoint has their own SOC. And depending on the solution that we're deploying at a particular client, we have one of those two generally as for EDR monitoring, response, and remediation in real time.
Mhm.
And then we offer other services that basically it just make us more sticky from the perspective of we're able to add this 24/7 component as opposed to being a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 shop.
Mhm.
What we're really 8 to 5 on is the end user support stuff.
Mhm.
What we're 24/7 on is all of your cybersecurity, server management, and all of your backup disaster recovery stuff to know what the condition of that is 24/7. The way to do that is not to try and build that yourself. I mean, the reality is enterprise companies are building SOC, their own internal SOCs, and it's basically costing them millions of dollars just in
Mhm.
salaries and things of that nature. And it's like, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can outsource those same or those same services through a company like an MSP who partners with the ConnectWises or the Blackpoints of the world, and we're able to offer that solution at pennies on the dollar compared to what they can build it internally for.
Does an enterprise client of yours or SMB client of yours get an account manager or someone that like or VCSO or anything of that nature? Do you guys offer that
It
or?
really depends on the services that are being offered, but yeah, they can. We do have dedicated resources. Like I have an L3 engineer for we have a Fortune 500 that's a partner, and we have a dedicated L3 engineer who works with them for all of their backup disaster recovery and server issues. And he runs point for any project work and things of that nature. If there's a need, then he will pull in an account manager to do proposals or things of that nature. But for the day to day, there's a dedicated resource from the technical side of the equation,
Mhm.
and then we'll pull in resources as needed. He'll pull in resources as needed to get things done. But it allows us to remain lean.
Right. No, for sure. Which is the exactly how it's the best way to scale, right? And
Sure.
can I ask you, didn't we? I think we had a conversation a couple months back, and I think I might have asked you, like, did you always do tech? Were you always would you know you were going to be an MSP? And I think you told me you were doing something completely different before,
Yeah,
right?
I was a when I graduated from college, I was a double major in psychology and sociology. So I worked with kids outside of when I graduated college. I worked with kids in the basically social sciences. I was for lack of a better term, a case manager, and
Mhm.
prior to that, I was working with the Department of Juvenile Justice and a private not-for-profit that did screenings for drug and alcohol and mental health issues. So, this was a total departure, and I decided that. Well, actually, I decided I wanted to make a living and get be able to afford getting married and things like that. And so I
Right.
started I started my career. I started basically went back to school for IT and was actually doing the MCSE path with Microsoft when I got hired on by IBM. And that kind of the IBM path kind of wrote the story for me going into the MSP path. That and having
Mhm.
kids. Once I had kids, then it was kind of like I did this. It was total accidental that I
Mhm.
started the business, but it just kind of took on a life of its own, and I just kind of riding the wave.
How did you, do you, so you got to learn the technical side of things, understand what a business needs are to be secure and compliant. But how did you learn to operate a business? How did you learn to do sales and marketing? For an MSP that's watching, what tip could you kind of give there too?
Yeah, that's, I mean, like, I'll say it like this: for a long time, I did it wrong.
Mm,
And I was a glutton for punishment from the perspective of, uh, I didn't, I didn't embrace what's already existed or what's already out there. I kind of was trying to do trial and error and figure it out on my own. And to be real honest, it was a lot of word of mouth. And we were your traditional, we're gonna grow organically, we're gonna do this, and the reality is that doing that is like a slow death. So it was probably seven years ago. Well, actually, let me backtrack. About 10 years ago, we went to a sales academy up at. I was invited by one of the vendors. It was we were a Continuum client at the time, and one of my sales rep or my account rep for Continuum invited me up, and basically I went up to Pittsburgh and went to a sales academy, and it was your typical sit down, go through class. It was great. What I didn't realize is after 5 o'clock, when we all went out to dinner and sat down, and you started to have that peer interaction with other MSPs and realized these guys aren't my competition. They're collaborative. They
mhm,
want to see me succeed. They want to do these things, and I started talking to them, and that's what I would say is if you're starting out, the first thing you need to do is find a peer organization to be involved with. Whether that's through sales and marketing or whatever, but find a outlet where you have the ability to meet with other MSP owners, and really hear what's working and what's not. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel is already completely built, and there are hundreds of MSPs. If you get into these peer groups, every single MSP in these peer groups are going to want to, they're going to want to see you succeed, and they're going to offer advice. They're going to offer, but pick their brain. Do what they're doing that you see them being successful at. And but I would say that the biggest mistake that I made for the first 15 years that we were in business, and we've been in business for 21, is that we didn't properly market and we didn't focus on sales. We focused on the technical and being the very best at what we did. And so, like, my goal was to be the very best at every piece of the business from the technical side. That's
mhm,
great, but
mhm,
you're if you're focused purely on that, you're going to spend so much time on such a few number of clients that you're never going to be able to really expand and grow. So what my advice would be, find a niche market, or find a solid offering that's repeatable. You don't have to be, well, the other part of it is that I always went above and beyond, for every customer. And then when my employees would go out, they didn't do quite as good of a job. So the customers started wanting me to come out all the time. And what I didn't realize was that because I was going above and beyond, because it's my business,
mhm,
you can't expect employees to treat your business like you do. You
mhm,
have to realize they're employees, and they're going to do what they have to do and what's required of the business or what's in the agreement, and that's it. So what you have to do is learn to dial it back, because you're selling good or you're selling better. Okay. You don't have to sell best of everything. You have to sell good across the board, because the reality is that most of the MSPs, or the people that are out there from a competition standpoint, are not very good,
mhm,
and they do things poorly, or they rip people off, or they give people a bad taste. All you really have to do is come in and deliver on what your SLAs are, and
mhm.
if you exceed those, set them at a point that's normal, exceed those, and then market that. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? And when I say market that, I mean you have to, there's an investment that you need
Mhm,
to do in your business every day. You need to put money into getting your name, developing a brand, getting your name out there,
mhm,
digital marketing, those types of things. And then really the biggest mistake that I see most MSPs make is they don't sell. They don't make selling They're number one. They don't turn their organization into a sales organization. They're a services organization. And the ones
Mm,
that are going to see if you're looking for financial independence, you're looking for the ability to grow, and you're looking for the ability to have an exit strategy or a plan to become something bigger, more than just a one or two man shop, you have to sell. And you're not going to do that well yourself all the time. So invest in training, invest in hiring like right now we have a fractional sales manager that we pay to come in and actually manage and support our salespeople so that
wow, that's
they
good.
actually have everything they need to be able to close deals. And
Right.
that's an investment, but it's like, and you may not be able to do all of that right off the bat,
Hmm.
but bite it off in chunks,
But there
budget it.
has to be a shift at some point from being focusing on the tech to the sales. Mm.
Yeah, if you don't, I mean, I'm assuming that the vast majority of the people that are coming in here as MSPs, the reality is the vast majority of the people that I know that have started an MSP came from the technical. So they were
Mhm.
engineers or they were, technicians who basically said, you know what, I'm going to go do this for myself. I can do it
Mhm.
better. Um, there are a few good books I would tell you to read.
Mhm.
If you're looking at it from a financial side,
Mhm.
things like Profit First, where it'll teach you how to set up the company on the financial side to be
Mhm.
successful right off the bat. Um, you know, read. I would tell anybody who's starting it, who is a technician or an engineer. There's a great book from the late '90s, early 2000s called The E-Myth, um,
Mhm.
and it's basically teaches you that when you start a business like this, it's really three jobs. It's
Mhm.
the engineer work, so the work that we do day to day, the manager role, which is the role that you know you have to run the business and you have to do the financials and you have to do all of the things that are non-technical to keep the
Mhm.
business running and to really grow the business and do everything else. And then there's the entrepreneurial role, which is developing the vision for what you want your business to be, and
Mhm.
then setting it on a path to actually doing that. Well, each of those
Right.
roles is a full-time role.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you have to know
Yeah.
those things
A
up front.
COO, a CEO, and a
Yeah,
CFO.
and
Yeah.
eventually you're going to build that team out as you grow. You're going to build that. We're still in the process of building that out. I mean,
Yeah.
we're actually growing in such a way where we're very scalable from the technical side of the equation, the front of the house and everything else. Where we're not scalable right now is on the back end of the house. And that's something that I'm in the process of working through right now. And it may be private equity. It may be
Mhm.
partnering with another MSP and merging. Those are
When
things
you
that,
say
or it may
back
just be
end,
painfully the back
can
end.
you clarify that?
Yeah, the back end is all of your contractual stuff. It's all of your obligations from the financial side. It's dealing with all the vendors and dealing with all of the internal costs, the payroll and benefits and all the things that you as a startup, you're probably not going to have a payroll company. You're probably not going to have benefits. You're probably not going to have retirement and things like that. So those are all things that come over time as you grow because if you're going to want to hire candidates that are good, you need to
Mhm.
be competitive with larger firms that actually offer those things off
Mhm.
the bat. Like,
Yeah.
we provide a vehicle, an insurance, we
Mhm.
provide health insurance, and a path to um, the financial, but not we don't provide actual retirement benefits, but we do have access to other portfolio stuff so that if you want to set it up on your own, you can. So
Right.
it's things like that. But you have to do those things if you want to be competitive as you grow, because you're going to lose the best candidates
Mhm.
to providers and
Let
companies that will
let
provide
me
them.
Yep. Let me ask you this, because a lot of MSPs that I talk to, the main issue a lot of times, and I even, my number one, obviously I work for a vendor that sells to MSPs. My number one competitor I see is not necessarily the MSP itself, but the MSP's clients, and it's getting that MSP to be able to sell to his clients. I deal with MSPs of all sizes, and some of them are trying to actually sell guards versus selling their service, and having guards included in that. How did you guys figure out how to communicate? And you probably still are learning this, but how do you continue to educate and communicate to a client? And how does an MSP sell a service to a client and just stress the importance of adding new security or the changing landscape of security. Like, hey, yeah, we started you off here, but based off of, the industry and the trends and this and that, I need to move you over into this direction. And a lot of MSPs are having trouble having those conversations. Like, how is that working for you guys?
All right. The way we've done it is we've just structured it in a way where we're not selling products, we're selling services. So, in other words, we're not selling you guards,
Point.
and we're
Or
not selling you an endpoint detection and response plus this plus this. We're selling you cybersecurity as a service. So, what we do is we basically look at what our cost model is per client, and then we look at what so in other words, if I'm working with a medical practice, I kind of know what their compliance requirements are and their cyber liability, cyber crime because we deal with a lot of medical practices. I know going in, okay, we're going to need things like EDR with SOC monitoring. We're going to need immutable backups. We're going to need to have RMM, plus we're going to need to have some zero trust, as well as privileged access management. And we're going to need to lock this environment down. We're going to need to roll encryption services, all those things. Well, I'm not going to go through and list out line item all those things. We're going to basically sell them cybersecurity as a service and backup disaster recovery services. And we're going to give certain guarantees like server management. We do 24 by 7 by 365, 100% uptime guarantees on servers. And the way we do that is by managing both the front end and back end of the server. And what I mean by that is we're managing all the health and upfront benefits or upfront on the server. And then we're also managing the backup disaster recovery of that server with immutable backups so that God forbid that server were to physically crash or have a problem or get a lightning strike or something along those lines, we can spin up that server again on the backup because we do a backup every hour of every server. Okay,
Mm,
so basically we have the ability to say, hey, we're not going to, you're not going to have any downtime. And if we do, it's a fraction of the month what they, what we would, pay out if they have any downtime, but it's
okay.
minimal. So it's things like that, and it's being able to market, being able to market your services as a comprehensive service and not as a line item
Mhm,
solution, and address things. One way that we've also been able to do it with, just use the example for guards.
mhm,
We talk about cybersecurity like it's an onion. Okay,
mhm,
onions have layers. Cybersecurity requires that you have layers, because if they can penetrate one layer,
mhm,
they can generally penetrate it again if it's the same type of solution and things like that. So drilling through that's not hard. But if you've got multiple layers uh, of security and they work hand in hand with one another to
mhm,
deter the enemy, what happens is you generally get cyber. If you think about it from a cyber criminal perspective, and you're looking at a node and you hit our customers and they start to go through it and they see how guarded and how protected it is, it's not worth their time because there's a
mhm,
lot of low hanging fruit out there that they
mhm.
can very easily just pass on to and go there. um,
Yep.
it's not to say that they're not going to try and then they're not going to do things, but we approach it from the perspective of like, look, we're not a one and done. I'm not just selling you antivirus, next gen
Mhm.
antivirus. I'm selling you 24 by 7 by 365 monitor response and remediation in real time
Yep.
for things like ransomware and everything else, like,
Do you
and
do
the
you guys
ability to
package
recover.
that? Do you have like I've seen that done in like a good, better, best packages. Is there different layers to that?
We do. It's not. We generally make the recommendations for what we see from a assessments perspective. So we'll do technical assessments up front when we talk to a new prospect or client. We'll come in and actually do uh, a cyber assessment for security and for just best practices, to
Mhm,
see how they've got everything configured, and then we'll make recommendations based off those assessments, what we find, and generally that recommendation is like this. Um, Generally, people's budget is like this. So what we
mhm,
do is we say, okay, we're going to go ahead and take this and shrink it down to this with biggest bang for the buck, the things that you currently have budgeted, maybe push their budget a little bit, and then
mhm,
take the rest of it and put it into what we call a risk acceptance form or a decline of service, and basically just acknowledge and tell the client, hey, we've found all of this. Your budget doesn't allow for us to do the whole thing, but we've taken the things that we see as the highest risk and the biggest bang for the buck for you, and we've put those into a proposal, and then we've put these other things over here, and you know we're telling you what the risk is. We're giving you a path to remediation, and for whatever reason you're opting out. And opting out, you're going to release us from liability in the event you have an incident related to those things.
Right.
And that to fix it, we're still going to be here to help you get through it. We're still going to be do whatever, but that would be a billable thing, and you're not going to basically sue us
So, yeah.
for that
Okay.
liability. And then what we do is once we get all this other stuff in place and get them onboarded, we will look at that piece that's in the risk acceptance and see, are there things we can modify or change to where there is no cost associated to protecting it moving forward. And those things that we can do like that, we will, and treat them as a project, like a one-time project. And
Mhm.
then from there, whatever's left over, we'll just plan on incorporating in future
Mhm.
budgeting
Mhm.
and bring them up over the course of a year to 24 months to
Right.
get that all covered. So the idea is let's get in and take care of as much as we possibly can up front, make them
Mhm.
aware of what's there, and then
Mhm.
address it as we can,
Okay.
but push them in a direction to do it.
Right. Okay. Do you have a lot of co-managed situations? What happens if there's a current IT provider in place or an internal IT team? Like how do you move around that?
Um, we've dealt with both. The co-managed from a internal IT team. The initial getting buy-in is the hardest part. But
Mhm.
if you what we found with co-managed is that when we come in, they're all very threatened and very guarded and don't want to deal with us. And my whole thing is to put them at ease, and let them know, hey, I don't want your job. I want to make your job easier so that you can become the specialist you were
Mhm.
hired to be,
Mhm.
and let us handle the low hanging fruit, do the heavy lifting of the things that are redundant and that maybe don't require. I mean, you don't want to have a network engineer that you're paying $120,000 a year doing a password reset for an end user. I mean, that's a waste of resources and time. So what we want to do is take the low hanging fruit out of the equation, free up their time, and give them back part of their day so they can be specialized like they were. What generally happens is once we put our base stuff in, and it's usually a small footprint, it's usually not like all in all at once. What happens is we come in and put in a small footprint like servers or backup disaster recovery, and within a matter of months, the guys who were so reluctant to have us come in are the ones who are reaching out going, hey, do you guys do this? And it's
Mhm.
like, sure. And we start talking and they start pitching us. And before long, we're doing a whole ton of things that make us incredibly sticky. And then the
Mhm.
goal is to continue to grow that relationship and do things and we offer co-manage. One of the great things with co-manage is we give their internal resources access to the systems that we use to support them. And once
Mhm.
you give them those tools and give them access into those tools, and they know that they can't get those tools for cheaper somewhere else,
Mhm.
then you're locked in and you've got the buy-in and support of the internal staff. And then it's a matter of just doing a good job on what you're supposed to do. So, I mean, it's like those are great. The other one, that's the internal staff. The other one being like third parties. Um, Look, I mean, my thought process is if we come in and we're asked to do something and there's an existing MSP relationship with a large company, and they want a second MSP because they don't want all their eggs in one basket, that's fine. I would rather deal with that and just because I'd put our services up against any provider in the state of Florida, and know that what we're offering, bang for the buck, is on par or better than 99% of what's out there. And
Mhm.
and so I'm and our mindset is if there's ever a problem, we're going to overcompensate to
Mhm.
fix it and to make it right for the client because we'll never err on our own side. We'll always err on the side of the client.
Right. Okay. I had a friend today call me, and he, bless you, and he was telling me that, his father, and they're in a lot of business together. They do a lot of, they're entrepreneurs. and somebody had scanned his phone, and maybe in the airport walked by him and just like ripped all his information off of his phone with like some kind of magnetic scanner kind of thing or whatever. And he was asking, about, any if there's any MSPs out there that, work with individuals or high net worth individuals or things like that. Is that some, what are your thoughts on that? Have you heard of that? Is that a market? Is there a market for that?
Yeah, there is. I mean, we've got a couple of where I'm from. We're home based to a couple of major corporations, and we have a couple of executives that we've done work for.
Mm,
Uh, it's it really depends. I would say those are isolated or independent things. Those are going to be the call of the MSP. The thing that I would worry, or the thing that I would caution you on, is don't get too caught up with the fact that you're dealing with somebody who's high profile and everything else, because the reality is you're going to have to be highly confidential on all that anyway. So you're
mm,
not going to be able to use that person as a reference account and things of that nature. So unless you just really get your kicks and giggles from having like connections with people who are really, powerful or famous or whatever else, I mean, that's great. But um, the reality is that the services you're going to do there, if you're trying to be an MSP, that's not really MSP work. That's really kind of concierge level, uh,
mm,
personal thing. So,
mm,
but I do say that there is a market there for certain things. Being able to, impress someone like that, who maybe, in our case, it's executives from major corporations.
mm,
They have influence with other people,
mm,
and they have the ability to introduce you in certain circles, um, to people who might be able to help your MSP. But
right.
again, it's a situation to situation type of thing, and we've been fortunate in that respect. But at the same time, there
Mm.
are some that I've worked with that are famous that I would rather not have worked with.
Oh wow. Yeah. Do you get how important is it for an MSP to pick and choose who they work with, right? Like, well, how does an MSP determine like when to just not choose to work with a client that the money's not worth it?
I think when you're being asked to race to the bottom, that's you have to know your worth, okay, and you
Mm,
have to know the worth of your business. It's not, I think a lot of us when we started, and I was very guilty of this for the longest of times, is I would take any client, and it
mm,
was because I just felt like I needed the revenue. And the reality is that it tends to actually be the smallest clients that are the most difficult,
mm,
and it's not because they're bad people. It's that they're paying you $200 or $300 a month, or $300 to $500 a month, and they act like they're paying you 10,000, and they want to call you 10 times a week and have you work on issues, and they don't want to pay anything additional. And it's like, hey guys, I mean, you're literally paying 1.5 hours of
mm,
our rate for your monthly cost, and
mm,
that's for support of this scope. And
mm,
it's like, it's not just a free range market. So
mm,
the thing in that is to just be cautious about the clients that you take. Pick specific verticals, I would think, is another one. Like,
mm,
if you're great with dentists, or you've got, you set up and you've got a half dozen clients or a dozen clients as a startup, and which of those ones do you do work for that requires the least amount of work and pays you the most money? And I
mm,
don't mean it like, for the longest time we thought one of our customers was like our best customer because we were there all the time. And then when I looked at the actual numbers, it was actually Robin Robbins from Technology Marketing Toolkit.
yeah.
And we went through there when we first started doing marketing. We did that with them, and
Mm,
one of the first things she had us go through was an exercise to determine who our best customers were, and there was specific criteria. And it was like this aha moment. We've been servicing this particular client for over 10 years, and it was like, wow, like, I thought they were our best client, and they're actually one of our worst clients, from the perspective of we're spending 2 to 3 hours a day on
mm,
site at one of their locations, one or the other of the locations. And I'm thinking, well, this is a great client because we're showing them all the time how good we are and everything else. And then we had another client that was a co-managed client that was a
Mm,
massive corporation, and we were doing one basic service for them or two basic services for them, and we maybe did 3 hours a month in
mm,
support. And it was like, and they were paying us a ton of money, and this other company was paying us a ton of money, but we were also doing 15 hours of support a week.
right,
So
right.
we're spending 60 plus hours a month
Mm,
at this one client and spending, 3 to or 12 hours a month at the other. And it's like, how do you not see that mentally, but
mm,
because you're looking at the wrong metrics.
right.
So I think it's very important to understand up front your numbers.
Yeah.
And it takes, and that's something that I would say is very, very important is get some sort of analytics. Make sure you get if you're going to set up a system like a PSA system, whether it's Autotask or ConnectWise PSA, get it set up correctly. And you're going to hear me say something that I don't want to ConnectWise or, Kaseya to hear. Don't hire them to do the setup. Find a
Mm,
third party consulting firm that does it. They'll do it cheaper, they'll do it better, and they'll do it custom to what you want, and they'll do it in one third the time. You know what I
mm,
mean? So, and they'll do it right. So that the whole idea is that you're doing everything right in the system off the
mm,
bat. So as you grow and scale and hire additional people, you can have processes and workflows in place for those technicians that are onboarding or other personnel to be able to learn and take those things over instead of just being a cog in the wheel. They literally can help to grow your business by taking over pieces of the business for
that's
you.
good. Yep, that's great. That's great. Oh man, Rob, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really thankful we got to do this. It's been a great relationship, so far. Just getting to know you, and we ran into each other at an event. And MSPs, if you're not at these events like ConnectWise or Kaseya Connect, please go. There's a lot of value there. Rob, how can people get in contact with you if they wanted to learn more about you or SNS Polk?
Sure. Well, I'm in LinkedIn, so you can look me up there. Our company's in there as well, Secure Network Services. You can also go to www.snspolk.com. That's SNSPOLK. That's our website. From there, you can either shoot me an email. I think my phone number is actually on there, so you can actually just shoot me a call or just shoot me an email, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone here. And you hit on a point right there that I would say is very, very key and important. If you're not if you're using a particular product line or service, like so ConnectWise, we're a ConnectWise shop, so we make sure that we go to IT Nation Secure and IT Nation Connect
Mhm.
at a minimum every year. We also started going to PAX 8 Beyond. And really, those are just opportunities for you to see to see from the vendor's perspective or vendor perspective what's out there to know that what you have in your offering is
Mhm.
the best bang for the buck, as
Mhm.
well as to gain some peer interaction and meet people that you're going to be able to bounce things off of and learn from. So that's a huge mistake I made early on, was never going to any of the conventions, thinking, well, I can't afford it, and what am I going to really learn? And the reality is that it's incredibly eye-opening, and you'll have conversations with people either like myself or much, much bigger, much more experienced, much more seasoned and refined than even we are. And they're happy to show you
Mhm.
how to do it.
Yeah,
So take advantage of it.
that's great. That's awesome. Thanks, Rob. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thanks.